So welcome to the Shelley Wynter Show. I'm joined by my good friend, my brother, one of my longest supporters. This guy, as I said before, has believed in me when I was walking around thinking that, I wasn't good at this or wasn't talented, and he's the one that kept pushing me and telling me, keep doing it, keep doing it. And now I'm at 95.5 WSB. I'm sitting next to my brother, Killer Michael Render, I call him.
Congratulations, man.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. So I want to start. You grew up here in Atlanta.
Yeah.
What was it like to grow up with the Andy Youngs, the John Lewises, the famous civil
Well,
rights
you're going
heroes?
big. That's who the people know nationally.
Right.
I
But I'm
grew
saying
up,
you-
I grew up not only with Andy and John. I grew up with Andy and John in context to their context to their homeboys who grew up with them too. So I grew up with Joe Lowry. I grew up with Ralph David Abernathy. I grew up with the Hosea Williams. I grew up with Allie Pat on the radio. I grew up in an ecosystem of power-filled black people who did not let me make celebrities out of my leaders. So Andy was a hell of a mayor. With that said, my grandmother could be in his office in 6 phone calls. John Lewis, man, hell of a representative. With that said, my uncle knew him from when he was in Alabama. So no one seemed out of reach. Nothing seemed out of stretch. Every mayor within Atlanta during my lifetime have lived within 8 miles of me. And I didn't have white folks to point at and blame. All my heroes and villains look like me. That doesn't mean there wasn't white power here. Doesn't mean there wasn't white money. Doesn't mean it hadn't been white county commissioners, city council people, and all that. The ecosystem politically was so dominated by black people. I saw such a thriving economy in terms of black people that figured it out and worked hard and created a working class and middle class. I just didn't think anything was impossible. And I knew everywhere wasn't like that, but I knew Atlanta required of me to give what it had given, and that's like immense opportunity.
And so when you saw that growing up, how did that impact your politics? Did it impact your politics in a way where you see certain things that were done and you say, oh, we
Just
can't
made
do
me
that?
more pragmatic because my grandparents argued. They were politically different. They loved one another. They had great moral center and compass in terms of how they raised us. They were both from the deep South. My grandmother from a land-owning family in Tuskegee, Alabama. My grandfather from utter poverty in Edenton, Georgia. But here they were in Atlanta making a way, raising their grandkids in the Collier Heights, which is a western enclave. It's in the enclave of Dixie Hills, Cedar Grove, Bankhead, Hightower, all that. But it was a working on up through affluent class, mixed community.
All in one area.
Yeah, all in one area. The Russells were 3 streets behind me. So the richest black development family in the Southeast are 3 streets behind me. I'm 3 streets up. We're in the little 900,000 square A-frame houses in the front. It's hard to doubt yourself when your neighbor has an indoor pool and a tennis court. You like, they look like me. They go to the same school as my mama and I did. Oh, I got to be able to do this. You see, a coach like Don Dollar, Dollar, who was coach of Frederick Douglass High School, win state championships in mid-'80s. His son is your classmate. One of his sons goes on to Georgia Tech. Other son goes on to win the NCAA championship with UCLA. Your best friend goes on to play pro ball. One of your other best friends, who's Osher Jackson, is now Chief Judge Osher Jackson. There was a lot of inspiration to do good. And if you did bad, be good at doing bad.
Right.
Be like Wesley Merritt, you know what I'm saying? Who you may not know, but Atlantans know that man. He was a numbers man and helped a lot of people, but they, in his obituary, AJC interviewed a guy this way and said, man, it's a right way to do wrong. And even Mr. Merritt contributed back to our community. Charlie Cato, who was also rumored to be a numbers man, things like that. He gave just as much money to civil rights marches as some of the legitimate people. So what I saw was an ecosystem of blackness. And politically, how it affected me is my grandmother was more Democratic leaning. She was a huge supporter of Andy. First campaign I ever worked was 1980, walking around door knocking with my grandmother for Andy. My grandfather was probably what more you would describe as a libertarian. He did not believe in a lot of government intervention. His famous quote, one of my grandmother's shortest and best arguments, he would say, if God gave you an appetite and a brain to figure out how to fix a fishing pole, why should you have to ask the government or pay the government to fish there? And my grandma said, well, somebody got to pay the game warden to clean up the fishing hole, Willie. And that was their, diametrically, that's how they were apart. She believed that government had a place, although not too much. My grandfather wanted as little government as possible because he think, to him it was natural law. God gave you an appetite, there's a fishing pole, there's a fishing pond, make a fishing pole and fish. My grandmother saw the need to pay some additional taxes the fishing park was taken.
So that being said, I want to go back to what you were talking about, because we've had this conversation before. When you talk about on your show, you talked about this a little bit, where those what we would call the other side of the law, were the supportive and funded a large part of the civil rights movement. Can you talk about that?
I mean, just Google Wesley Merritt, and it's a beautiful article written about him. He was killed, I think in '95, maybe. He was killed. A gunman killed him, and it was when drugs had kind of taken over. Drugs brought a type of violence that the black community hadn't seen before. You're dealing with numbers, you're dealing with liquor, you're dealing with violence. It might be at the gambling house, but the violence was set aside for where that type. Drugs kind of brought violence everywhere, because a lot of the older criminals got locked up, and us young men were just left on the streets with nothing but our emotions, a bunch of money, and drugs, and that kind of took, everything had an order in this country. You'll talk to some of your comrades in the music industry that may be of Jewish descent, maybe of Italian descent, Irish descent. They'll let you know during bootlegging, my grandfather was it. Right. And they don't say it with any shame. It's almost like an amount of solidarity. Well, black people have to understand at some point we had that too. Wesley Merritt was a good man, a stand-up man. He happened to be the numbers man, happened to be probably a liquor man. He also was a people's landlord that was understanding, that kept their homes up. He also lent people money, sent people to Morehouse, Spelman, sent people to Clark, sent people to Morris Brown. So he was as needed in the ecosystem as everybody else. Your cousin who know how to get in touch with the people to get your car back is just as important as your cousin as a police officer, depending on when you need them.
Right.
So I learned not to judge, but I knew that my grandmother said right is right and wrong is wrong. So, if you got caught doing wrong and that was your wrong, and you paid your tithing for it in whatever way the government demanded you to, and you came home, you got back to living, which is why I'm a proponent for, in matters of politics, and I'm a proponent for making sure that people, once their sentence is served, not have to do an extraordinary amount of time on probation, not have to wear the felon scarlet letter for the rest of their lives so they can't get into jobs that mean something. Cousin of mine did 5-6 years federal prison. That could have stalled the rest of his life. He has a city job now. He said, "Cuz everything I got selling drugs, I got working for the city. Had I known this, I would have did that first." He got the same Rolex I got on. He got the same chain. He got
Working for the city?
Yeah, he works for the city.
Oh, I'm doing the wrong thing.
I think we both are.
Yeah.
Shit, you know how much I had to travel to get this stuff.
I need to work for the city.
But he works hard, and the city pays him well, and he has a pension. And when he gets to be an old man, he'll get to hang out with his grandchildren. But I think that Atlanta has shown me that we're just human beings are human beings, no matter what we are. So I didn't have, the only white people I saw were on TV. I saw Mr. Rogers, saw Bob Ross. You know what I mean? I didn't have white people in over me on a daily basis. I had 3 white teachers my whole life. So I saw blacks in leadership. I knew we could lead. I knew we could lead very well. I knew we could lead not as well. When I look at the Atlanta school system, at one point, man, it was a stellar school system. It was producing people that were inspiring and inspired. They were motivated. They were hope-filled. At some point, and I say we, as a collective, as a part of the community, we have let these kids down. These schools have amazing names, but we as the collective, I'm not talking about the school board, I'm talking about us, the voter, the parent. My wife and I went to Mays High School last week, cut 40 young boys' hair. Frederick Douglass High School now has a barber program up there. The Frederick Douglass Ninth Grade Academy has a beauty academy. And I think that all high schools in Atlanta, especially ones named for black people, should have all that. We should be able to accommodate a child that's taking their ACTs and SETs and going on to Morehouse or Spelman, and we should be able to accommodate the kids that are going to Roberts Hair Care School in Murray, Murray. So I think that we can, I think we could do a better job at kind of refocusing what Atlanta is.
Let's go a little bit political right now and ask, do you favor school choice in the way in which someone like me or, my side of the fence?
I understand the necessity for it, so I can't argue against it because it's producing. Now, I'll tell you this, though, on the other side, you've crippled good schools. So creating, say, a Best and a Coretta at schools.
Say that again, you've crippled
good schools. You've crippled good schools. Frederick Douglass High School, and I'm just using my school as an example. Mm-hmm. Frederick Douglass High School was a stellar high school. Frederick, 67. Stellar high school. It had the creme de la creme from an educational standpoint. It had the ruffians, me, T.I.s, and Shouty Lows. It had all these kids in the middle who could go, up and down. Now, I'm smart, Tip's smart. We liked excitement though. Right. So we couldn't get in the magnet program, but the teachers recognized we were smart. So, if I got kicked out of regular class, I had to go sit in the magnet class. So by I'm learning. I'm around kids who are thinking here. So, my friends go on to become chief judges. My friends go on to become the dean of technology at Georgia Tech, Raheem Biya. My friends also, some of them go to federal prison.
Right.
They get out and say, well, that was dumb. Let me do this a smart way. Now they're business owners. There was a big ecosystem of everybody could, would, and should, and we encourage each other. With the school choice, what we have, unfortunately, though, is some of the creme de la creme from an educational standpoint have been plucked away, and now they're not there to inspire their peers. And what we've left is one school that once had 2 principals, School of Excellence, state championships, now has went through 7 or 11 principals. And every principal is trying to do their best, but it's not happening because you're not there long enough. You're not there with a long enough tenure. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah,
so we
definitely.
take a school that's a National School of Excellence, and all of a sudden we talk about making it something else. Well, why would Frederick Douglass, the most photographed man in the 1800s, Frederick Douglass, possibly one of the greatest Americans to have ever graced this land, why would we be thinking about a school name for him versus fixing that school in whatever way it needs to be fixed? So am I for school choice? Isn't it much the question is, what has school choice done to the schools that were producing great students in spite of and making them great students because of?
But do you think that going through that many principals, having the problems, there are a bunch of kids there that we can save rather than letting the whole group, until you fix the school, letting the whole group just go down the tubes?
I don't think the whole group was going down the tube.
Well, no, that was now currently.
Yeah. The
currently
principal
now.
instability. No, it's actually doing pretty good now. It's pretty
Okay,
solid.
so it's got
Alumni
turned
back up.
around. Okay.
Yeah, but the problem is with turning around, you still have went through. There's a
9
tradition there.
principals,
You get what I'm saying? When I'm
I
talking
do,
about
I do,
Frederick,
I do.
Talking about
I was just talking more about the school choice portion of
yeah,
it. You
yeah,
know?
and I'm not mad at school choice. I'm just letting you know what I've personally seen it do. See,
right.
I'm only dealing with hyperlocal.
Right,
In theory, I believe in polygamy. How many wives I got?
Right. What? You got
Huh?
one. You got one.
What I'm saying is, in theory, it's good for us to argue these points, but what's going on in the school down the street from your house?
Yeah, fair enough.
And that's all.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
I want
Fair
Coretta
enough.
Scott King school to win. I want Best Academy to win. I don't want Frederick Douglass to have to lose for that to happen. I would have liked for my daughter to have been able to go to Douglass. She went to Therrell instead. Her cousins went there and graduated. Her cousins, my daughter, her mom just didn't trust Douglass enough. But Frederick Douglass is back on the track now. Now that I know one of my nephews and nieces, may be going back, then that makes me very happy. And the big part is because I got re-engaged. Other alumni got re-engaged. We got alumni over there cracking the whip. Like, the same way they cracked the whip when they was in SGA, we were in school, they cracking the whip now. And I would encourage Atlanta high schools that are named for Booker T. Washington, Frederick Douglass, George Washington Carver, C.L. Harper. I would encourage us to all do that in the same way we do black colleges. Because, with gentrification, that's the big scare word. With gentrification, white folks can go to schools named for Frederick Douglass too. Right. Latino kids are in those schools. They're being educated well. And they're being educated well, not just about a black man, but about an amazing American. And I think that we should approach all our history that way.
Let's go to politics now. Instead of doing like word association, I'm just gonna give you the name, the concept, the policy, whatever, and then you just go off on it, right? So let's start here with the Beltline and MARTA.
Yeah.
I'm gonna kind of push you, but not really. But with the Beltline and MARTA, what I'm seeing when integration was coming and Oprah went up to Forsyth County,
Yeah.
and they had the big water riot, people protested and everything. It was easy to call rural whites racist because they were from North Georgia, they were rural, it was easy to paint this broad brush. But now you're seeing in-town Atlantans, which are mostly liberals, Democrat voting, white folks pushing back against MARTA on the Beltline. What are your thoughts?
I think my wife loves the Beltline. I'm rarely there. I'm an Atlantan, so it's still taking me getting some used to seeing that many white folks in one place at one time and not being in Forsyth.
Not being what?
Not being in Forsyth County. In
Right,
Forsyth, I know I'm seeing. I better
right.
be out of here by 7 o'clock.
Right.
On the Beltline, it's like 8 o'clock. We look like the Beastie Boys. Doesn't bother me at all. I think my grandfather let me know that this city's going to change every 20 years. There's no irony that Atlanta's symbol is a phoenix that burns itself up and reapproaches. So I'm not surprised to see white people back. Not surprised to see white people connecting. I would just encourage white neighbors to talk to your neighbor before you call the cops. You never know who you're living next to, why you're living next to them, why they're there, how long they've been there. and you should see those people as legacies and treat them as that. In terms of the people along the Beltline and MARTA, I don't know because I don't fully understand the Beltline because I'm a driver. I tend to drive places I go. What I would like to see is MARTA do is expand to Douglasville, expand to Conyers and Covington, expand all the way up to Forsyth, and expand down to Macon and beyond. I think that we have to get a more sophisticated system than an in-town system that's just north and south. I think MARTA wants to do that. I think we wanted to do it. I think a lot of other municipalities have been resistant to it. But I think Cobb County understands the need for MARTA now that the Braves are playing there.
Yeah.
I think that Kennesaw could use MARTA. I think that there are lots of people that work in Atlanta that would like to be able to catch a quick railway there versus cars. And in terms of MARTA on the railway, I don't know. I mean, on the Beltline, I don't know. I thought the Beltline was for biking and jogging. I thought the Beltline was going to be visited by the trolley. I don't know. I don't like the trolley much, but they keep telling me it's going to be a good thing.
It's going to come, right? That's kind of and that's what I think. That's what the pushback has become. But it's just interesting how the pushback is being covered differently than the pushback from Forsyth. And I know the differences, but it just
there's also 30 years difference too.
Right.
You know what I mean? When you talk about Forsyth, it wasn't just Oprah. It was Hosea going up there with Martin King Mass. It was also people who had, white flight happened in Atlanta. Cleveland Avenue wasn't the all-black sector of Atlanta. Northwest Atlanta, the bottom of Northwest Atlanta, just before you get to Alexander Bolden Road, there was poor white folks up there. So a lot of those white folks left. A lot of those white folks pushed on out. Then, you push out, here they come again. You never know what the feeling was. I'd heard that there was a black community in Forsyth where blacks had got put out of 100 years prior. So I don't know. But I know is when you bring civil rights people there to agitate something, the agitation is going to happen. Right. You know what I mean? And it happened, but it was 30 years ago. Now, in terms of what's going on in town, what's going on in town is not just race. I would think some of it is class and culture.
I think most of it is class.
Yep, middle class people are moving here, and they don't want to deal with people who are working class or who are uncultured to their taste. And we here though, and they own their. So you're going to have to figure out. Atlanta's going to have to do what it is classically done. Figure out a way to do what's best for Atlanta. Right. And Andy, said years ago, you sit at the table, you figure it out. Everybody leaves a little uncomfortable. Everybody leaves with more. Everybody leaves with something. And if we're thinking in the city, we'd stop thinking the next 20 months ahead of us and think the next 20 years ahead of us. What made William Harts feel wise enough to understand that if we don't get this airport and keep it, we're going to lose it to Birmingham?
Right.
So let me give Delta this. What made Maynard smart enough to know to say 29% of your business has to be involved with it, owned by black folks if you're going to do business with the city? But then a lot of people don't know he required the same thing of other people too. He said you got to have some black folks in it, white folks in this too. So when you look at a Herman Russell, is, the story's always been told he was an amazing black man, amazing black developer. It wasn't until you watch this documentary, you got to see he partnered with a white guy too. Hired a white guy because white guy couldn't go to South Georgia.
Right.
I mean, he couldn't go to South Georgia popping up on Forsyth.
Right.
So he said, he had a partner he dealt with. And I think that ultimately Atlanta's lesson is partnerships. How do we forge partnerships that are better for us all? How do we sit at the table and say, well, what is the conclusion we can come to where all of us get something out of this and generations forward versus fighting for what we want now?